Attachment feels like love until you realize it's stealing your peace. But what if you've been confusing love with fear all along? The knots in your stomach, the drama, the endless overthinking. It's not love. This video will reveal why Carl Jung's concept of the shadow holds the key to breaking free from this emotional chaos, so you can build a life of true, unshakable love, starting with yourself. Emotional attachment comes with a price, one that often goes unnoticed until it's already weighing you down. The racing thoughts, the urge to check your phone late at night, that tight knot in your stomach when you're waiting for a reply. These are not signs of love. They're signals of anxiety and dependency, symptoms that something deeper is driving your need for connection. You might think you're just passionate or invested, but what you're really experiencing is fear dressed up as devotion. Let's be clear about what this fear looks like in real life. You find yourself trembling as you wait for a message, your mind spinning with worst-case scenarios if you don't hear back. Nights blur together as you scroll through their social media, searching for proof that you still matter to them. These habits don't come from a place of healthy connection. They come from a desperate need for reassurance, a need so strong it hijacks your peace and makes you question your own value. As the research explains, you're hooked on that other person the way an addict craves a drug because it soothes an unacknowledged void. The high of their affection gives you a rush, but the withdrawal, when they pull away, leaves you feeling empty, restless, and even more dependent. This cycle of craving and crashing isn't accidental. It's built into the very nature of attachment. You chase the moments of validation, and when they disappear, you spiral. Jung argued it's not love, but fear that binds us. Fear of loneliness, fear of inadequacy. This fear is relentless. It demands a constant stream of reassurance, forcing you to look for worth outside yourself. You don't just want the other person. You need them to fill a space inside you that feels unbearable when left empty. That's why attachment feels urgent, even suffocating. You're not loving the person for who they are. You're clinging to them as a lifeline. But the cost doesn't stop at anxiety and sleepless nights. Attachment chips away at your identity. The more you shape your life around someone else, the less of yourself remains. You start to edit your words, soften your opinions, and suppress your ambitions just to keep the peace. You trade authenticity for proximity until you no longer recognize yourself. Every decision gets filtered through the question, will this make them stay? The result is a slow erosion of self-respect and personal freedom. You wake up one day and realize you've become a shadow of the person you used to be, all for the illusion of security. Here's the truth. Attachment pretends to be love, but it's not. Love is expansive, not confining. It allows two people to grow alongside each other without demanding that either one shrink to fit the other's needs. Attachment, on the other hand, is rooted in fear. It's about holding on so tightly that you lose sight of who you are. Jung's insight was simple but profound. Fear binds us to others, not out of genuine connection, but out of the terror of facing ourselves. Love lets you breathe. Attachment makes you gasp for air. You might want to push back against this idea. Maybe you tell yourself, I'm not afraid, I just care deeply. But if you look closely, you'll see that attachment always hides behind the mask of love. It whispers that you're only whole when someone else is there to complete you. Strip away the illusion, and what's left is the fear of being alone, the fear of not being enough on your own, the fear that without another person's validation, you'll disappear into emptiness. This fear convinces you that letting go means losing everything, but in reality, holding on is what's costing you the most. To break free, you have to see the price you're paying. Is it your sleep, your focus, your sense of self? Every sleepless night, every anxious thought, every time you silence your own needs just to keep someone close, these are tolls exacted by attachment, not love. The hardest part is admitting that what you're feeling isn't devotion, but a signal that something inside you is crying out for attention. Until you acknowledge this cost, you'll stay trapped, always believing that if you just try harder, the fear will finally go away. Ask yourself, is your relationship a source of freedom or a cage built from fear? Do you feel supported and seen? Or do you feel like you're shrinking to fit someone else's expectations? Attachment thrives on illusion, but love thrives on honesty. The honest truth is that the love you're chasing in someone else is really a reflection of the love you need to find within yourself. That peace you're hoping another person will give you? It's something you have to build on your own. Remember this: attachment is fear. Love is freedom. They may feel similar at first, intense, consuming, impossible to ignore. But one keeps you chained to someone else as a way to avoid your own pain, while the other sets you free to be yourself, alongside someone who values your individuality. If you're living in fear and calling it love, you're clinging to a locked cage and convincing yourself it's home. But you were never meant to live confined by fear. Understanding this difference isn't just an intellectual exercise, it's the first step toward real change. But knowing the cost of attachment only raises more questions. If fear is at the root of attachment, where does that fear come from? Why do so many of us fall into this pattern, even when we know it hurts us? The answer lies deeper, in the earliest chapters of your life, long before you ever called it love. Every pattern you repeat in love, every urge to cling, every fear of abandonment, every moment you lose yourself in someone else, can be traced back to the earliest lessons you absorbed about what it means to be loved. Carl Jung called this wounded part of you the inner child, carrying those original emotional debts into your adult relationships. The foundation for how you attach to others was poured long before you ever understood what attachment was. And the truth is, you learned more from what you didn't receive than from what you did. From the beginning, your world revolved around the adults who cared for you. Their approval, affection, and attention weren't just nice to have. They felt essential to your survival. But what happens when that love isn't consistent, or when it comes with strings attached? Imagine a child praised only for perfection. Every gold star, every flawless report card, every time they keep their feelings in check, they're rewarded. They learn, quickly and deeply, that love is earned. That child grows into an adult who must constantly perform to feel worthy, always afraid that one misstep will cost them everything. It's not just a story, it's the reality for so many who find themselves stuck in cycles of anxiety and self-betrayal. It goes deeper than just wanting to be liked. If your caregivers withheld affection when you disappointed them, or if you were only noticed when you met their expectations, you internalized a dangerous lesson. Your value depends on what you can do for others. So you start to ignore your own needs, silence your opinions, and shapeshift into whatever keeps you safe. These aren't just quirks, they're survival strategies. They're the blueprint for your adult attachment style, and they're the reason you might find yourself in relationships where you're always giving, always chasing, always afraid to be left behind. Naming this pattern is the first step to breaking it. You weren't born desperate for validation or terrified of being alone. You became that way because as a child, you had to adapt to the reality in front of you. When love felt conditional, you learned to do whatever it took to keep it, even if it meant losing parts of yourself along the way. These habits become invisible rules you follow without question. You chase people who feel familiar, even if they can't give you what you need, and you call it love because that's what you've always known. It's painful to admit, But most of us are just reenacting old scripts, hoping for a different ending. The adult who panics when a partner pulls away is the same child who once waited for a parent to come back and make things right. The one who keeps quiet to avoid conflict is the same kid who learned that speaking up meant risking affection. These aren't just random quirks. They're deeply ingrained survival mechanisms, and they don't disappear just because you've grown up. The wounded inner child still lives inside you, reacting to triggers with the same fear, anger, or sadness you once felt, even if you don't realize it. Jung's insight was clear. The emotional scars of childhood don't just fade with time. They follow you, coloring your sense of self-worth and shaping how you trust others. You might have a job, responsibilities, even a family of your own. But when old wounds are touched, it's often that younger version of yourself who takes over, desperate to be seen, terrified of being left behind. And the hardest part is that it all feels automatic, like this is just the way relationships are supposed to be. But understanding where these patterns come from doesn't excuse the ways they show up in your life now. It's not a free pass for staying stuck or hurting others. It's about recognizing that the way you learned to attach was never really a choice. It was a necessity. You did what you had to do to survive, to feel safe, to get just enough love to keep going. But survival isn't enough anymore. If you keep carrying these wounds into every new relationship, you'll keep repeating the same old pain, always searching for the comfort you didn't get, always ending up disappointed. Healing starts with facing the truth about your inner child, the parts of you that still hope someone will come along and finally make things right. It's not about blaming your parents or caretakers. Maybe they did the best they could. Maybe they didn't know any better. But now, the responsibility is yours. If you don't acknowledge the emptiness inside, you'll keep looking for someone else to fill it, and you'll never feel whole. No partner, friend, or family member can do the work for you. The job of healing what was wounded is yours alone, and while that can feel overwhelming, it's also the most liberating thing you'll ever do. Because once you stop outsourcing your happiness, you can finally start building real self-worth. Your attachment patterns aren't your fault. You didn't choose to grow up with unmet needs. No one does. But you do have the choice to stop letting those old wounds dictate your present and future. Healing your inner child isn't about erasing the past. It's about giving yourself what you never got: validation, compassion, and security, so you can stop chasing it in others. It's about understanding that the love you're desperate to receive from someone else is really a reflection of the love you need to find within yourself. But recognizing these wounds is only half the battle. There's another layer, one that isn't as obvious, one that hides beneath the surface. The question isn't just how these wounds were created, but why we work so hard to keep them hidden. What if the very freedom you've been searching for isn't outside of you at all, but buried in the parts of yourself you've been unwilling to face? Facing the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore is never easy, but it's the core of what Jung called shadow work. The shadow, as Jung described, is the side of your personality that holds everything you suppress: your fears, insecurities, anger, neediness, and shame. It's not just an abstract idea. It's a real psychological force shaping your choices and relationships, often without your awareness. Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's not just philosophy. It's a direct explanation for why you keep repeating the same painful patterns, even when you know better. You might wonder why certain relationship mistakes keep happening. Maybe you're always drawn to partners who can't meet your needs, or you find yourself clinging to people who only leave you feeling more alone. It's not random. The shadow is at work behind the scenes. These aren't just bad habits. They're the result of old wounds and beliefs you never fully faced. If you've buried a fear of abandonment since childhood, you'll project it onto partners and demand proof of loyalty you can never satisfy. The need for reassurance becomes endless because the real problem isn't your partner's behavior, it's the old fear you've never addressed. Shadow work isn't about erasing these parts of yourself. It's about recognizing them, bringing them into the light, and integrating them into your conscious identity. That means looking honestly at your jealousy, your insecurity, your neediness, not to judge or banish them, but to understand where they come from and why they exist. You might want to believe you're above these feelings, but pretending they don't exist only gives them more power. The more you suppress them, the more they influence your actions, often in ways you don't recognize until it's too late. Let's make this real. Say you feel a rush of jealousy when your partner talks to someone else. Your instinct might be to deny it, to insist you're not jealous, that you trust them. But beneath the surface, the feeling lingers. Shadow work asks you to pause and ask yourself why that jealousy is there. Is it rooted in a belief that you're not enough? Does it come from a time when you felt overlooked or abandoned as a child? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary if you want to stop being ruled by emotions you don't understand. The process requires honesty, and it's uncomfortable. You have to sit with feelings you'd rather avoid: fear, shame, anger, sadness. You have to admit that sometimes you're needy, that sometimes you're afraid you'll never be enough, that sometimes you're desperate for validation. This isn't about self-blame or wallowing. It's about seeing these parts clearly, without judgment, so you can stop letting them run your life from the shadows. When you start to acknowledge these hidden parts, you begin to dissolve their power. That's the paradox. The feelings you avoid only control you when you refuse to face them. By naming them and understanding where they come from, you take away their ability to sabotage your relationships. The jealousy that used to drive you to pick fights or demand reassurance becomes just another feeling, one you can sit with, understand, and respond to with compassion instead of panic. Jung's insight is that the real goal is integration. You're not trying to become a perfect person without flaws or fears. You're trying to become whole, someone who can see every part of themselves, even the ugly or uncomfortable ones, and accept them as part of the human experience. Integration means you stop projecting your pain onto others. You stop demanding that someone else fix what you're unwilling to face. You reclaim the power you once gave away, and you begin to relate to others from a place of choice, not desperation. This isn't a quick fix. It's a lifelong practice. Every time you catch yourself reacting with anger, jealousy, or anxiety, you have a chance to pause and ask, what is this really about? Whose voice am I hearing in my head? What old wound is being touched? The answers won't always be clear, and the process can be exhausting. But over time, you start to see patterns. You start to recognize when you're projecting, when you're seeking validation, when you're running from your own discomfort. And that awareness is the beginning of freedom. Shadow work gives you the tools to break the cycle of attachment and emotional chaos. It teaches you that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love. You don't have to hide your flaws or pretend you're not afraid. You just have to be willing to see yourself honestly, to accept the parts you once rejected, and to take responsibility for your own healing. That's where real self-worth comes from, not from someone else's approval, but from your own willingness to face the truth. But even with this awareness, there's another challenge that keeps so many people stuck. You might understand your wounds, you might see your patterns, but why does chaos in relationships still feel so impossible to resist? Why do you keep getting drawn back into drama, even when you know it's hurting you? The pull of emotional chaos isn't just about old wounds, it's about something even more addictive, something that can feel impossible to turn away from. Let's look at what's really happening when you find yourself pulled back into the same cycle of emotional drama, even when you know it leaves you feeling drained. Breaking the addiction to emotional drama isn't just about willpower or wanting things to change. It's about understanding that your brain has become conditioned to the rush, the spike of dopamine that hits during those intense moments, just like it would with any addictive substance. Higher dopamine spikes mirror those in substance addiction, driving you back for more drama, even when you swear this time will be different. Think about the roller coaster you ride in these relationships. At the peak, there's adrenaline, excitement, and a sense that everything matters in this moment. The argument, the tears, the desperate apologies. Then, just as quickly, you plummet into anxiety, distance, and silence. The lows feel unbearable, so you do whatever it takes to get back to the high. Maybe you pick another fight just to feel close again, or you chase after a reconciliation that brings a fleeting sense of security. This isn't just a bad habit. It's your nervous system chasing the chemical rush, using drama as proof that the relationship is alive. Here's the trap. The more you feed this cycle, the more you start to believe that love is supposed to feel this way, exhilarating, volatile, never calm for long. The absence of chaos feels like emptiness, so you stir the pot just to feel something. If calm feels wrong, ask yourself, what part of me is terrified of peace? That question isn't meant to shame you. It's an invitation to notice how much of your identity has become wrapped around the intensity of emotional turmoil. The drama becomes a distraction from the deeper fear that, without it, you'll have to face yourself in the quiet. Let's make this real with a single sharp example. Picture a couple locked in a heated fight. Accusations, raised voices, both sides threatening to walk away. It's painful. But when one person finally breaks down and apologizes, there's a rush of relief, even euphoria. Suddenly, you're close again, united in the aftermath of chaos. In that moment, the intensity feels like love. The drama convinces you that the pain was worth it just to feel this alive. But this is the addictive pull at work. It's not the person you're attached to, but the cycle itself. Underneath all of this is a deeper truth. The addiction to chaos masks something you'd rather not face. The fear of emptiness, of not being enough, of feeling unworthy when things are quiet. When the conflict ends and the adrenaline fades, you're left with yourself, your doubts, your loneliness, the old wounds you've carried since childhood. The drama isn't just about excitement, it's a way to avoid sitting with those feelings. Your mind would rather keep you spinning in conflict than let you confront the silence that follows. Idealization plays its part, too. In the beginning, you might put the other person on a pedestal, convinced their love will fix everything that hurts inside you. But when reality breaks through, when they disappoint you, reveal flaws, or simply can't meet your impossible expectations, the pedestal crumbles. You start to resent them, magnifying their shortcomings and blaming them for the pain the drama brings. The cycle repeats, not because you want the chaos, but because it's become familiar. Familiar pain feels safer than the unknown. This pattern doesn't just damage your relationships, it chips away at your sense of self. The more you lose yourself in the highs and lows, the more you forget who you are outside of the drama. You minimize your own needs, silence your desires, and become someone who survives on scraps of emotional intensity. The relationship stops being a partnership and becomes a stage for reenacting old wounds, always searching for validation, never finding peace. So, how do you break free? It starts with seeing the addiction for what it is, a cycle that keeps you from facing your own fears. Every time you catch yourself reaching for the next argument or craving the next reconciliation, ask yourself what you're really running from. What would happen if you let things be calm for once? What would you feel if you stopped chasing the high and sat with the discomfort that follows? The truth is, real love isn't measured by intensity. It isn't found in chaos or validated by constant conflict. Real love is steady. It's calm. It gives you space to breathe, to be yourself, to grow, without fear that peace means something's wrong. When you let go of the need for drama, you open the door to a different kind of connection, one that doesn't require you to sacrifice your identity or emotional well-being just to feel alive. Breaking the addiction to emotional drama doesn't mean you stop feeling or caring. It means you stop letting chaos define your worth. You learn to find meaning in quiet moments, to build self-worth that isn't dependent on someone else's approval or attention. The roller coaster slows, and you realize you don't need the ups and downs to feel real. You can choose peace, and in that peace, you start to see the possibility of a relationship that doesn't demand you lose yourself. This is where the real work begins. Once you see the cycle for what it is, you have a chance to step off the ride and reclaim your emotional power. The question becomes, how do you build a life where your happiness doesn't hinge on someone else's words, actions, or presence? That's what we'll explore next. Reclaiming your emotional power starts with a willingness to step outside the patterns that have kept you dependent on others for validation. The process isn't abstract. It's grounded in what Carl Jung called individuation. Jung described individuation as becoming your true self, integrating anima and animus, your internal feminine and masculine, to stop seeking outside completion. This isn't about becoming perfect or detached from others. It's about integrating every part of yourself, even the ones you've spent years hiding or dismissing. When you begin to see yourself as a whole, not as someone waiting to be completed by another person, you start to reclaim the power you've handed over to relationships, approval, and old wounds. Facing this process means stepping into discomfort. The comfort of attachment, even when it hurts, can feel safer than the unknown territory of standing on your own. Attachment gives you a script, a familiar structure, even if that structure is built on fear or neediness. Letting go of it forces you to confront the empty spaces you've avoided. This is where individuation demands courage. You're not just changing habits, you're redefining who you are when you're no longer propped up by someone else's approval or attention. The fear of loneliness, the anxiety that rises when you imagine life on your own, these are not punishments. They're signals showing you exactly where you've avoided yourself. The moment you stop running from the silence, you begin to hear what you actually need. The first real step is honest self-reflection. There's no shortcut here. Blaming others for your pain, if they'd just loved me better, if they hadn't left, I'd be happy, keeps you trapped. Every time you look outside yourself for closure or healing, you're giving away your power. Self-reflection means asking, what have I been chasing in others that I refuse to give myself? Maybe it's reassurance, maybe it's a sense of worth, maybe it's the feeling of being needed. The answers aren't always comfortable, but they're the ground you have to stand on if you want to change. If you want to make this practical, start with a simple journaling exercise. Write down one complaint you have about someone, something that keeps coming up, something that triggers you. Then ask yourself, which part of yourself are you actually upset with? Is it the part that feels ignored, the part that feels small, the part that's always waiting for someone else to make you feel better? That's where healing begins, not with changing the other person, but with understanding the wound inside you that keeps getting poked. This isn't about blaming yourself, it's about clarity. When you see the pattern, you stop running from it. Boundaries are the next step, and for most people, they feel like a threat. You worry that saying no or asking for space will push others away. That fear is real, but it's also the reason you've been stuck. Boundaries aren't about building walls. They're about protecting the space where you can finally hear your own voice. As Jungian practice suggests, start by saying no to small demands. This reclaims lost power and establishes your inner sovereignty. You don't have to start with the biggest confrontation. Practice with something small. Decline an invitation you don't want. Ask for a moment alone. Choose your own needs just once. Each time you do, you're teaching yourself that your comfort and well-being matter. The people who value you will respect these boundaries. The ones who don't were never truly there for you. None of this works without self-compassion. Most of us punish ourselves for being needy, for making mistakes, for not moving faster. But if your inner voice is always a critic, how can you ever feel safe enough to change? Self-compassion isn't weakness. It's the foundation for growth. When you slip up, and you will, what matters is gently steering yourself back, not punishing the relapse. Notice your progress, not just your failures. Gratitude helps too. When you focus on what's right within you, your strengths, your efforts, the small ways you've shown up for yourself, you start to build a sense of validation that doesn't depend on anyone else. Meditation and visualization also have a place in this process. Not the kind that asks you to empty your mind, but the kind that asks you to sit with your truth. Close your eyes. Picture your inner child, the part of you still waiting for the love you didn't get. Ask what they need. Listen, even if the answer hurts. This isn't about fixing everything overnight. It's about starting the conversation, about letting yourself acknowledge the emptiness so you can begin to fill it with your own care, not someone else's attention. As you work through these steps, you'll notice a shift. Detachment stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like freedom. You're not pushing people away. You're making space for real love. Love that isn't built on fear, control, or dependence. You stop reaching for someone to hold you together and start choosing relationships that add to your life, not ones that define it. Emotional independence doesn't make you cold. It makes you honest, present, and able to love without losing yourself. This isn't a straight path. You'll slip back into old habits, and that's okay. What matters is gently steering yourself back, not punishing the relapse. Every time you choose yourself, even in a small way, you're building a new foundation. What matters is the commitment to keep showing up, to keep asking hard questions, and to keep moving forward, even when it's uncomfortable. The most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you build with yourself. When you stop looking for someone else to fill your emptiness, you find a peace that isn't dependent on chaos or approval. You become whole, not because someone else completed you, but because you finally stopped running from who you are. And as you realize this, you start to see that the real love story isn't about finding another person. It's about the evolution that happens inside you.